Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating moments in history, a revolution that didn't happen with cannons and muskets, but with some seriously clever politics. This is the story of how a nation essentially fired its king and, in the process, laid the groundwork for democracy as we know it.
So think about it. How do you actually overthrow a king without starting a massive bloody war? It sounds almost impossible, right? Well, that's exactly what happened in 1688 in what we now call the Glorious Revolution. This wasn't about fighting in the streets. This was a masterclass in political maneuvering, all driven by a powerful mix of religion, fear, and one incredible gamble. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in 17th century England, and the country is still feeling the aftershocks of a brutal civil war. The whole kingdom was basically a political powder keg. You had this deep, simmering tension between the ruling Protestant majority and a Catholic minority that many people deeply distrusted. Every single political decision was seen through this lens of suspicion, and it was just a matter of time before something ignited it all.
And at the heart of this tension were two totally clashing visions for the country. On one side, you had Parliament. They wanted a nation governed by laws that they helped create, all within a strong Protestant tradition. But on the other side, you had the king, who believed he had absolute, God-given authority to do pretty much whatever he wanted. So, when a Catholic, King James II, took the throne in 1685, these two visions were put on a direct collision course.
And this brings us to King James II himself. I mean, from the moment he got the crown, it felt like he was going out of his way to antagonize the Protestant establishment. He wasn't just a king who happened to be Catholic, he was a king on a mission, and he was more than willing to trample over long-standing laws and traditions to get what he wanted.
And you know, his moves were not subtle at all. First, he starts appointing Catholics to top jobs in the government and the army, which was totally against the law. Then, he issues this thing called the Declaration of Indulgence. It sounds nice, but everyone saw it for what it was, a direct attack on the power of the Church of England. And to top it all off, he kept a huge, permanent army just outside London, which for a population terrified of tyranny, looked like a king building his own personal enforcement squad.
You can just imagine the panic. The fear was real. To the English elite, James II was starting to look a lot like King Louis XIV of France, the ultimate example of an all-powerful absolute monarch. They genuinely believed that all their freedoms, their religion, their entire way of life were in serious danger. This wasn't just some political squabble. For them, it was a full-blown existential crisis.
Now, even with all this alarm, a lot of Protestants had a very simple plan. Just wait. See, James II was getting older, and his heir, his daughter Mary, was a Protestant. So the thinking was, let's just wait him out, and things will go back to normal. But then, in 1688, something happened that nobody saw coming, and it shattered that plan completely.
This timeline really shows you just how fast everything spiraled out of control. For a few years, things are tense but manageable. Then, boom. In June of 1688, the Queen has a baby boy, and suddenly all bets are off. The crisis explodes. Just 5 months later, a foreign army lands on English soil. That single birth was the spark that lit the entire powder keg.
So why was this such a big deal? Well, back then, the rules of succession were simple. A son always came before a daughter. The second that baby boy was born, he jumped the line, pushing his Protestant half-sister Mary out of the way. The waiting game was officially over. The absolute worst-case scenario for the Protestant nobles, a permanent dynasty of Catholic kings, suddenly seemed inevitable. With their backs against the wall, a small group of powerful English nobles decided they had to do something drastic. They started to hatch a secret plot, a massive gamble that could either save the country or get them all executed for treason.
And get this, it all came down to just 7 men, a secret group of some of England's most powerful lords, who would later be known as the Immortal Seven. They secretly wrote a letter that would literally change the world. It was an invitation to William of Orange, a Dutch prince, who was married to James's Protestant daughter Mary, asking him to invade England and save them from their own king.
Now, William wasn't just some knight in shining armor. He was a brilliant political operator, and he saw this invitation for what it was, a golden opportunity. Accepting it would mean he could finally get England on his side in his lifelong fight against his main rival, Catholic France. It would boost the Protestant cause across all of Europe, and, of course, it would put his wife Mary right on the English throne. For William, this was a geopolitical jackpot. So, on November 5th, 1688, William of Orange's massive invasion force landed on the English coast. The whole country held its breath, expecting a brutal civil war. But the war never came. Instead, King James II's power just evaporated in a way that shocked everyone.
It was a total collapse. James's support disappeared, seemingly overnight. His best generals, huge parts of his army, the navy, they all switched sides and joined William. And in the most devastating betrayal of all, his own daughter, Anne, abandoned him too. The king was left completely and utterly alone.
Totally isolated, and realizing the game was up, James II panicked and fled to France. And this gave Parliament the perfect legal loophole. In a brilliant political move, they just declared that by running away, the king had abdicated or given up the throne. They didn't have to fight him or execute him. They just declared the throne empty. It was a political checkmate.
So now, with an empty throne, Parliament held all the power. They went to William and Mary and offered them the crown, jointly. But there was a catch. They had to agree to a brand new set of rules. This wasn't just going to be another coronation. This was a complete renegotiation of what it meant to be a monarch in England.
And what came out of this was the birth of the constitutional monarchy. The old idea that kings ruled by some divine right from God, that was over. From now on, the king or queen would rule according to the law, passed by Parliament, just like anybody else. The monarch's power was no longer absolute. It was defined and limited by a constitution.
And these new rules were written down in the landmark English Bill of Rights in 1689. And if you look at this list, every single point is a direct response to something James II had done. No more ignoring laws passed by Parliament. No more ruling without calling Parliament together. No more threatening politicians. And absolutely no more personal armies without Parliament's permission. It was a systematic dismantling of absolute power.
The message could not have been clearer, and it was permanent. The power dynamic in England had shifted, once and for all. The age of the all-powerful absolute monarch was done. From this point on, Parliament was in charge.
And this chart shows you that power shift perfectly. Before 1688, you can see the monarchy holds most of the power. After the Revolution, the scales tip dramatically. Power flows away from the crown and over to Parliament. This wasn't just a new person on the throne, it was a completely new system of government. So, you might be asking, why does this English Revolution from over 300 years ago still matter? Well, because its ideas became the direct inspiration for modern democracy. Things like freedom of speech in the legislature, protection from cruel and unusual punishment, the whole idea of limited government. These core principles were lifted, sometimes almost word for word, by America's founding fathers when they wrote the U.S. Constitution and its Bill of Rights. The legacy of the Glorious Revolution is baked right into the DNA of the United States.
Which leaves us with a final, really powerful question to think about. The Glorious Revolution proved that an idea written down on paper, the idea of the rule of law, could ultimately be more powerful than a person wearing a crown. It established the principle that a government's legitimacy comes from the people it governs, not from God. And that's an idea that has echoed through history and continues to inspire people all over the world today.